In the early immigrant histories, there's almost no mention of women. And when we think about the role that women played, we realize that it was far more significant than what those early history books gave us reason to claim.
Thea Foss, a familiar name known to some in Tacoma, Washington because of the city waterway and waterfront park that bear her name. It is an area of major urban redevelopment, and Thea's name regularly appears on signs or in print throughout the region. When you do an internet search on Thea Foss, most of what appears are entries about the waterway, several about Foss Maritime Company history, and then a very few tidbits about the woman, a 19th century Norwegian immigrant. Who is the woman behind the name?
How about the woman in the kayak? Can you kayak over here for a minute? We want to ask you a question. Do you know who Thea Foss is?
Where Thea Foss is?
No, who Thea Foss is?
No, who's this?
Do you know who Thea Foss is?
Yes, I do.
You do?
Yes.
Could you tell us?
No.
Hi there. Can you tell us who Thea Foss is?
Where is it?
No, who she is.
Who she is?
Excuse me, sir. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you know who Thea Foss is?
Yes, Thea Foss is right over there.
Do you know who Thea Foss is?
Yeah? Yeah. Tugboat Annie. Tugboat Annie.
For many people, Thea Foss was Tugboat Annie, but that's just legend. In fact, she was the inspiration for this beloved fictional character. Although they were unlike in many ways, Thea Foss and Tugboat Annie shared the qualities of independence, honor, and perseverance. Tugboat Annie became a popular, iconic Depression-era folk heroine.
Gee, Mom, don't let Severin get the laugh on us, will you? Huh. The old North and South ain't never let us down yet, has she?
In the 1930s, the Tugboat Annie character was popularized through a series of short stories published in the widely read Saturday Evening Post magazine. These dozens of episodes led to several novels, 3 major Hollywood feature films with some of the biggest stars of the era, and a television series in the 1950s. The original film is still shown today.
Would you like to borrow our engines? Ha! You like to borrow a smack in the pouch?
The Depression takes us into a certain period of circumspection and a view of our world in real terms, unromanticized real terms. And it's out of that period that Tugboat Annie comes along. This period is a critical period in terms of just the American perception of women. And through popular culture and other means, the figure of a woman character that is not your delicate, demure character begins to be matched with an independent, self-reliant, self-determinant character.
However, Thea was neither a tugboat captain nor the wife of a bumbling ne'er-do-well. She was a highly principled Norwegian immigrant whose adult life on the shores of Washington State's Puget Sound spanned changes in maritime commerce from the decline of the sail to the beginning of the modern tugboat. How did this woman, called Thea by Norwegians, or Thea in her new homeland, come to be honored by her community and exalted as a pop culture heroine? Born in 1858 in a Norwegian village near Eidsberg, not far from what is now Oslo, daughter to farmers and sister to 8 siblings, Thea was schooled until age 14. With famine and depression gripping rural communities throughout Norway, Thea moved to Oslo to relieve her parents of the burden of feeding another child and to work as a servant to a wealthy family. Due to necessity, Thea and women throughout Europe would be faced with profound changes that would affect the direction of their lives.
In the 19th century, people found themselves in a time of overpopulation, scarcity, and the first signs of an industrialized economy. And that brought individuals, including women, to the cities for the first time, so that they began to venture out beyond the normal sort of household economy.
But there remained at least one tradition Thea was happy to hold on to. While visiting her sister's family, Thea met the love of her life, Andrew, a young carpenter and seafarer who had already sailed much of the world. Although he was unschooled and could barely write his name, his adventurous exuberance and skill as a craftsman captivated Thea. As for Andrew, he was smitten by her long golden hair, graceful stature, and self-confidence. Andrew's determination to win Thea's hand is told by Kjell Undrum, a more recent owner of Thea's Norwegian home.
Andreas kom fra Skifoss I Rødnes, og det et sted som ligger mange kilometer øst for her. Og den gangen Andreas gikk på frierføtter hit til Thea, så var det dårlig med veier. Og vi hadde ikke sykkel, og vi hadde ikke bil. Så han kom til fots den lange veien over skauen, og han kom fram ved huset her sånn.
With the economy slipping, and knowing life in Norway would not get any easier, anxious to start a new life together, Thea and Andrew agreed that the best opportunity lay across the ocean. Like many young people their age, they heard of a better life in America. Job opportunities at higher wages, more freedom of expression, and the possibility of voting rights. By 1870, promoted by emigration marketers, newspaper writers, and earlier settlers, America fever had swept Europe.
There's also something at the core of the human spirit about wanting something bigger, wanting to experience the fullness of life. And I want to read a quote from a Norwegian woman, Henny Hale, who talks about her life growing up in Norway amid the mountains. I think more than anything else was that I couldn't see. I wanted to see more of the world. There was a hill up above our house, and where I really decided to go to America was on that hill. I had a Sunday off from this place where I was working, and I came home and I walked up on that hill and I stood on tiptoe. I actually stood on tiptoe. I felt like I was choking because I couldn't see over the mountains, and I decided I'm just not going to live like this.
As the 19th century neared its end, thousands upon thousands of Europeans like Thea and Andrew made the leap of faith and left their familiar life and family behind. Too poor to make the passage together, Andrew set off alone in 1875 on an arduous sea and land journey. After several months, Andrew arrived in Minnesota, a new territory in the vast Midwestern prairie land settled by immigrants. In order to make enough money for Thea's passage, he began months of hard labor as a carpenter. Andrew mailed off his earnings to cover the passage. After anxiously anticipating a reunion, he received news of an arrival and rushed to the station.
You can kind of envision this cold winter and him standing on the platform there and then waiting for all of these people to file off the train, and finally, the last person off the train sort of through the parting steam is his brother.
Disappointed that Thea had given the money for passage to his brother, Andrew went back to work again. After sending the fare a second time, he waited months and returned to the station.
The silhouette of a young woman comes out of the steam, but it's his sister. So again, foiled and disappointed, he goes back and begins to work on putting aside enough money to buy yet a third passage.
And then, one day, Andrew opened his door and was amazed at the sight of Thea, who had raised the money herself to make the journey.
They weren't married yet, so she was not going to feel indebted in any way to him, no matter how deeply she held the bond. And that was the way she got there.
The reunited couple married in 1881 and settled in St. Paul, Minnesota to make a home and begin a family. For 8 years, Andrew struggled to find enough work building houses, while Thea began learning American ways and language. She endured the heartbreaking loss of her first daughter, toddler Lily Marie, yet her spirits were lifted by the birth of their first sons, Arthur and Weedle. But the great opportunities they had hoped to find in America still seemed to elude them. By 1888, the family heard tales of the incredible opportunities opening in the Pacific Northwest and decided it was time to take yet another chance. Andrew took a job as a carpenter working for the new Northern Pacific Railroad. He departed alone again, leaving a pregnant Thea and the 2 boys to follow him months later, after daughter Lillian's birth. He headed west to the new terminus of the railroad, the Puget Sound seaport of Tacoma, Washington, where ships from all over the world were arriving, fueling a building boom beyond belief.
Incredible times. Rudyard Kipling would visit and call it a boom of the boomiest, he would call it, writing from the porch of the Tacoma Hotel. It would indeed have been that. It would have been a absolutely fresh, instant city, born at the end of the Transcontinental Railroad. The railroad brought people, and it brought goods and excitement, and it brought the telegraph. It was the internet and airlines and all of the technology of the day, the Industrial Revolution on wheels, all delivered to one capital city. We can kind of imagine this shanty kind of passenger cars with the wood benches, and at one end there would have been probably a wood stove for heat, and at the other end a little closet with a hole in the ground for a toilet. And in that, Thea with a babe in arms and 2 little boys, under 4 years old, running around, she came out.
With beach-combed wood and scavenged furnishings, Andrew built a new home in preparation for his family's arrival. Set under a bridge below the bustling downtown, amongst the often drunk sailors and homeless squatters, Thea and the 3 children settled in. Andrew and Thea reviewed their material assets, a few dollars, and Andrew's woodworking tools. Using water from a hillside stream and living on a waterfront little better than an open sewer, Thea contracted typhoid pneumonia within 3 weeks after arriving and almost died. After a long convalescence followed by pregnancy, Thea lost another daughter, Leela, in childbirth. Soon, the family was forced to move due to industrial development, and they ended up in a small tributary called Hallelujah Harbor, amongst other dilapidated shacks. If they looked closely at their circumstances, Andrew and Thea might have questioned if their life was better off than it would have been in Norway. But after the birth of their last child, Henry, the family's luck was about to turn.
There is this great story that is kind of the origin myth of Foss Tug about Andrew taking a job out on Long Branch Peninsula. While he's away working at being a carpenter, one of the rough and tumble guys living nearby, he tells Thea that he's going to stick a sign on his rowboat. Thea goes ahead and says, well, I'll buy your rowboat for $5. And she buys the rowboat and knows enough about boats to be able to fix it up and paint it with green and white paint, and she sells the rowboat. When Andrew arrives triumphantly with his paycheck from his job, Thea, in the family jug where they keep their money, Thea has already added more than he earned during his whole stay in her profit off rebuilding the rowboat. And from there, there's this sort of whimsical light that goes on where they arrive at the conclusion that boats and this enterprise might be the direction that they want to go.
Andrew, given his carpentry skills and seafaring experience, began building rowboats to satisfy the requests for rentals and transportation. It was a perfect time to be in the boat business. Everything people needed moved on the water. People around Puget Sound relied on water transport for work or recreation, whether by canoe, rowboat, sail, or steamships. Major roadways for the newly invented automobiles, trucks, and bicycles were decades away. The rapid growth of maritime traffic at the railroad docks and in the harbor, with products such as lumber, coal, and wheat being loaded and unloaded, provided ample opportunity for the growing influx of Scandinavian immigrants, numbers that grew by tens of thousands within a decade. Foss rowboats were replaced by engine-powered launches and tugs as waterfront tasks demanded more power and speed to tow or push loads and to travel greater distances. With their need for help in the growing enterprise, Andrew and Thea provided many immigrants their entree into the American dream. By 1912, the Foss Boathouse home, with Thea at the helm, became a dispatch center, a dormitory and dining hall, a shipyard, a mini farmyard, a general store, a social center. Immigrants gathered, learned English, savored Thea's Norwegian home cooking and coffee, all of which was always ready, the company motto Thea so aptly created.
Andrew very proudly says that he married the right woman, and he married a woman with great capability as well, and gives her wonderful credit for that, for the innovation she brought.
Bad health turned Thea's life upside down once again. After a long illness, daughter Lillian tragically succumbed to tuberculosis and died. Thea tried to overcome the sorrow by immersing herself in good work for the community. She was a founding member of the Daughters of Norway, Tacoma Lodge, helped build Normanna Hall, a gathering place for Scandinavians, was very active in her church, and spent her days attending the sick and needy. With a new home uptown, a bustling business, financial security, a thriving, ever-expanding family, Thea and Andrew realized their dream. As she reflected on her life, she wrote in her diary, "Do nothing without a purpose, and let that have some public end. This life is not for oneself, but to help each other." Her failing health forced her to slow down, and she lamented, "There are so many things left to do." On June 7, 1927, one day shy of 70, Thea passes, and her life was celebrated by the largest funeral Tacoma had ever seen. Thea had engineered the evolution of a company that transformed the Puget Sound waterfront. The boathouse grew and moved several times over the course of the years, and the fleet of boats multiplied by hundreds. Decades of business expansion followed up and down the West Coast and across the Pacific, with the Foss sons and relatives leaders in the company's success. Industry of all sorts grew up along waterfronts, due in large part to the versatility and utility of modern tugboats. This now giant tugboat company continues to expand during its second century, and to be inspired by the vision, philosophy, and entrepreneurial confidence of its founder, Thea, affectionately known by all as Mother Foss.
I think there is a legacy that's far beyond landmarks or organizations that still exist, but there are other ways of thinking about the modeling that Thea Foss, and especially the women, provided. I think of them as tradition bearers. I think of them as women who helped really show the way for future generations.